Okay, everybody, so we're going to be continuing on to our next stop at Navy Pier. Just continue looking over here to your left because we're going to see a couple other buildings. You see that one with the yellow onion dome on top of it? That one was built in 1930 as the Medina Athletic Association by the Shriners, so this United States philanthropic group. And then you also see one of my other favorite buildings in the city of Chicago, that one with the American flag on top of it. It's the Tribune Tower, built in 1923. Another Gothic skyscraper in the city of Chicago. And so you see those right angles actually coming out from the top of the Tribune Tower. Those are called, in Gothic architecture, flying pieces, which provides support from Gothic churches, except here they're just decorative. So going from the past, going to the present, we see the Rose Hotel over here to our right, which is Rose Hotel just completed at the beginning of the summer. You see actually the trees up here on top of their rooftop patio, which is rooftop patio open to the public. Actually, there's a really great restaurant up there. The largest rooftop patio in the city of Chicago now. And we are in this other new residential neighborhood. This is River East now, which we're actually passing by the AMC River East Theaters. Which, you know, Chicago was a silent film hub in the early 1990s. The early 1900s, excuse me. Because Charlie Chaplin, yeah, there we go. The sun was coming in right there. Charlie Chaplin, early 1900s, did a lot of filming right here in the city of Chicago. But then, when everything became talkies, they moved over to Hollywood. You know, now we see residential complexes, but over here to your left used to be a large brick building. It was the Kraft headquarters. And right across was this old warehouse building, now being converted into high-end condominiums. Also in this area was the Quaker Oats headquarters, in which grain cylinders actually, instead of buildings, grain cylinders used to line the river where a whole bunch of oats and wheat was stored. But this whole area is becoming a new residential area rather than a working area. But about almost 50 years ago by now, that building that you see right in front of you with the curved sides to it, Lake Point Tower, late 60s, it was the tallest residential building in the world at the time it was built. And also one of the only residential buildings built on our lakefront in the city of Chicago. Because there isn't supposed to be any buildings on our lakefront. The loophole of this building was that the guys had a lot of money to build it. So the two architects that designed this building, Shipwright and Caldwell, both Chicago architects and both architecture professors of my father at Illinois Institute of Technology. You know, it has this beautiful curved structure to it. It has that curved structure because engineering-wise, wind needs to be able to go around it easily, and if it didn't, it actually would break in half. And so the wind is easily able to go around Lake Point Tower. And actually, there were trees up there on top of this rooftop, which is a 2.5-acre rooftop garden. Alfred Caldwell, one of the architects, was primarily just a landscape architect. This was actually up here at Lake Point Tower. This was the first rooftop garden in the city of Chicago in the late 60s. Those as you see now also. You know, the curvature also reflects what we're on right here. We're on this lakefront, which does a lot of curving to it. Also, of course, reflects all, at night it actually reflects all the buildings from back here on the rest of the Chicago skyline. And of course, we are coming up to our next stop at Navy Pier, which opened up in 1914, over 100 years ago, as Municipal Pier. It was later renamed Navy Pier after World War I to honor those that served in the Navy. And so, you know, the Prohibition era, the Jazz era in Chicago, the 20s, was the highlight, the golden era of Navy Pier, where there was dance halls, there were playhouses, movie theaters, restaurants. People would come here to lakefront to, of course, experience this lovely lakefront breeze. The water tower stop on North Michigan Avenue. You know, to everyone that just got on my bus at Navy Pier, I was talking a little bit about this building, this curved building over here to your left, Lake Point Tower. This Lake Point Tower also where a lot of famous people used to live in the city of Chicago. So Tom Cruise, Dolly Parton, Halle Berry, Sammy Sosa, and Scottie Pippen, a Chicago Bull, used to live at Lake Point Tower. And when Oprah Winfrey came to live here in Chicago, when she started to film the Oprah Winfrey Show, she bought a place at Lake Point Tower. And then realized they had a penthouse. And so she wanted to buy the penthouse. Except they wouldn't let her buy the penthouse because it was a restaurant. So not getting what she wanted, she moved out of the building. But she just moved a couple blocks north to Water Tower condominiums. And you know what? We're actually in residential neighborhoods right here in the city of Chicago. Except this neighborhood right here, Streeterville, been here for a little bit longer because it's actually has a really cool history to it. So Mr. George W. Streeter, 1873, was chugging down the Chicago River in his steamboat, landed on the lakefront, and his steamboat broke down. So he asked the guy who owned the property where his boat landed, "Hey man, can I stay here until I fix my boat?" He's like, "Sure." Mr. George Streeter, didn't fix his boat for another 30 years. And so coming up to your right across the street, you're going to see a man that looks like a Monopoly man, has a top hat on, holding a little puppy. That's Mr. George Streeter, everybody. Look at that, so cute little puppy. You know, Mr. George Streeter, he was kind of like the Monopoly man, in which he sold property around here, except he sold it illegally. And so he was one of the first con men of Chicago. And so, for 30 years, the city of Chicago had court battles and armed battles with Mr. George Streeter. Because he was actually, instead of carrying a puppy usually, he was usually carrying a shotgun around with him. And so finally, they put him in jail, not for selling property around here illegally, but for selling alcohol illegally on a Sunday. Forbidden at the time. You know, he was actually selling this property illegally to these poor immigrants of Chicago who had lost their homes in this 1871 Great Chicago Fire. Which, has anyone actually heard or knows a story about how this Great Chicago Fire started? Really? Nobody? Nobody on this bus knows this story? Oh man, well then I can go straight from the beginning. Somebody knows. It was supposedly a cow. But for those of you that obviously don't know the story or didn't speak up, Great Chicago Fire started on October 8, 1871, lasted 3 whole days until October 11th. Destroyed 5 miles of the downtown Chicago, which are a whole route in the area destroyed by the Great Chicago Fire in 1871. Supposedly, it was Miss O'Leary's cow, Daisy, that kicked over an oil lantern and started the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Except it was later learned, 3 years later, that that story was completely made up. That the articles, he just wanted to sell newspapers. And so, Miss O'Leary and her cow Daisy officially exonerated in 1997. And we only have theories about how this Great Chicago Fire started. We still don't know how it became. So it could have been a lightning bolt that started the Great Chicago Fire. It could have been this next-door neighbor, Daniel Pegleg Sullivan, who was Irish and confirmed to be drunk at the beginning of this Great Chicago Fire. I know, right? Probably that one, or even the best one. Definitely the most plausible was that a meteor from space started the Great Chicago Fire. Yeah, I know. The most plausible out of all of them, but we just have theories, so we can only speculate. You know, this area now filled with high-rise condominium buildings, but originally this area, right after the Great Chicago Fire, used to have all these brick townhouses that line this area. As we're slowly going to come down here on Ontario, we're going to see some of these brick townhouses over here to our right. Which this first one, as you see, only 2-3 stories tall, and has the exposed sidewall. So there used to be a couple other townhouses right there, but as you see now, they're, guess what, they're going to build a new high-rise condominium building in that lot, of course. What else did you put there? But this one is now a French restaurant. It's not no longer just a completely residential unit. We're coming up past the Fairfield Inn and Suites. We're going to have this still residential townhouse in this Gold Coast area, one of the few residential townhouses left. So we see 212 Ontario, which there's a person that lives on each floor. There's a woman that works on a computer, a man that watches TV on the second floor, and a floor in that building gonna cost around $500,000. Yeah, because we're in the Gold Coast area. That building, one of the oldest buildings in this area too. But they're still not actually the most expensive units. Some of these penthouses in these condominium buildings probably going for about $5 million. So watch out for these tree branches right here. Gotta be careful with them. It's just, a little nature. Won't hurt you too much. And we are currently coming up to the Magnificent Mile, Michigan Avenue. Well, it's called the Magnificent Mile because it is exactly 1 mile of magnificent shopping in the city of Chicago. It is 8 blocks because 8 blocks does equal 1 mile in the city of Chicago. And actually, I hope that we'll be able to smell it because over to your left, you see Garrett's Popcorn Shop. Is anyone? Yeah, there you go. You smell the caramel melting, sugar melting. Has anyone yet been to Garrett's? Oh, perfect. I see a couple. Garrett's most famous for its caramel and cheddar popcorn mixed together. So some of you that have never had that combination before, it actually is amazing. It's like sweet and salty together. And as you see, there's already kind of a line moving outside Garrett's. That's how famous it is in the city of Chicago. You may have had that combination before, but you've never had it freshly made, so that's what makes it super good in the city. But also, there's other Garrett's locations located throughout the whole entire city, so if you ever pass by when there's no line, head in there. That'll be the best decision you make all day to buy a bag of Garrett's popcorn. And so, of course, right now, we are going to be turning on the Michigan Avenue up here, which this Michigan Avenue we now have today didn't look like this about 30 years ago. Remember those brick townhouses that I said that were back on Ontario? They used to line the streets of Michigan Avenue. So the usual height of many of these buildings used to be only about 2-3 stories tall. At the highest, it was maybe about 5 stories, save for a few buildings. But this changed in the 80s when our then Mayor Daley, he's like, we gotta get some people to come to Chicago because a lot of people were not wanting to come to the city. And so we designed Michigan Avenue, redesigned it, included these gardens in the middle and on the sidewalks to make Michigan Avenue a lovely new shopping area in the city of Chicago. Which one of the newest buildings right here on Michigan Avenue is this Burberry store over here to your right. Designed to look like a Burberry perfume bottle. I had to look that one up though because never have I needed to buy Burberry perfume in my life. I'm a student, I don't have money to be buying that. And so, it is my job to point out the older buildings here on Michigan Avenue if I told you that most of these buildings were built from the 1980s. So we have the Allerton Hotel up there ahead of you to your right. The hotel was built in 1925. Tip Top Tap was one of the tallest bars in the city of Chicago. Went there a lot. He tried to go west, except he learned that the Tip Top Tap had actually been closed for the last 4 years. So even before this was high-end retail, townhouses, this is where most immigrants lived in the city of Chicago. And also these 2 buildings were built in 1869 right ahead of us. We have the Chicago Water Tower over there to our left, and the water pumping station to our right. You may have heard that these buildings survived the Great Chicago Fire, but guess what? No buildings survived the Great Chicago Fire. These were rebuilt using the exact same stones from the original building, this limestone that you see now today. Which the Chicago Water Tower over there to your left was built around a large water pipe at one point, held water for the Chicago Water Pumping Station which pumped water into all the fire hydrants in the city of Chicago. The Chicago Water Pumping Station also used to be located right on the lakefront in Chicago, but as you see, buildings continue on for a little while over there to your right. So all that land added after this great Chicago fire. You know, today the Chicago Water Tower, little art gallery you can just like walk through in about 2 minutes. Chicago Water Pumping Station, the Looking Glass Theater, one of 250 theaters in the city of Chicago. And these buildings don't have any particular style, except the Germans who designed them were of course harkening back to buildings that they remembered in their home country in Germany on the Rhine River, many of these castles. Except of course these kind of look more like White Castles. And you know, the fast food chain White Castle got their building design from the Chicago Water Pumping Station. But that restaurant did not start in Chicago. It actually started in Columbus, Ohio, somewhere else in the Midwest. And right now, when we turn onto this Pearson Street up here to your right, we are going to be coming up to our next stop at the Water Tower, right almost at the north end of the Magnificent Mile. Of course, we're not there yet. We're going to turn, and then we're going to come up to the curb, and then we'll be at our stop. So don't worry, we'll get there soon. So as you see, there's a plethora of different options of stores here on Michigan Avenue. Of course, we have the high-end stores like Tiffany's, Bloomingdale's, Neiman Marcus. We also have the lower-ended stores. We have Forever 21. There's an H&M as well. Or if you know clothes and shopping are your thing, over there to our left we have a chocolate corner, and as we like to call it, there's Ghirardelli's and Hershey's, all in one central area. You can also take a horse carriage around here too on this Gold Coast area. But I have to tell you, they charge $1 a minute, so a 30-minute carriage ride is $30. But I mean, he's adorable. I mean, look at him. He's a beautiful gray horse. Okay, guess what? When we come up to this curve, we will be now at our next stop at the Water Tower. And here we go. Perfect.